27th of May 2016, and I went to the island of Skye with a view of circumnavigating the islands of Raasay, Rona, Skye, Longay, Pa Bay and the Crowland Islands. Quite a feat even for me, considering I planned to do the journey of over 100 miles in a boat that many would consider only suitable as a yacht tender. I set up base in the grounds of Strollamus Yacht Club, just to the north of Broadford, which in those days had space for a few campers. The forecast was for several days of fine sunny weather. I set up the boat on the shore beside the tent the night before, so I was ready to go first thing in the morning. I set off under a clear blue sky with a gentle breeze blowing from the southwest. A little morning mist clung to the sides of the hills of Bien na Caoilach and Bien na Crow. The little 6-horsepower Yamaha purred perfectly as I zipped across the sea surface around 15 miles per hour. My plan for the day was to head up the Sound of Raasay and continue on to the island of Rona, before returning by the eastern side of the islands to complete a circumnavigation. Half an hour into the journey, I had to slow down a bit as the sea surface became bumpy while crossing a channel between Skye and Raasay. I presumed it was caused by the tides in the area. Things started to settle again once I was in the Sound of Raasay. However, there was now a freshening breeze blowing. It was in the same direction as the tide was flowing, so the surface was still relatively smooth. The breeze then started to feel like a strengthening wind, which now worried me a little as it was not forecast. When the wave top started showing some white, I felt it was time to make a decision. I could continue forward, but I was not familiar with the coastline, so was unsure if or where I could land if the sea became too much for the wee boat. I could head back, but as I had only started my journey, I dismissed that idea. My only other option was to cut across the Sound from Raasay over to the mainland and the shelter of Portree Bay. And that is the option I took, as I knew in an hour or so's time, when the tide would turn, and if the wind remained as it was, this stretch of water would turn white with wind against tide. I took the 2-mile open crossing slow and easy, as it now meant the boat was side on to the waves. I watched everyone coming and turned to face into the larger breaking waves to avoid getting the boat full of water. Half an hour later I was in the safe shelter of Portree Bay and had a little look around. My plan B being, if the wind didn't drop, I could always catch the bus back to Strollamus, bring the car up and collect the boat. I always have to be totally flexible in such ambitious journeys as this. Landed in a soft sandy bay and enjoyed a breakfast picnic, sitting in the warmth of the sun. I was delighted to find the wind dropping again and headed back towards the Sound of Raasay, where I explored a huge cave, passing more time to allow the sea to flatten. Happy that the wind had dropped and the sound was again suitable for my small boat, I headed on my way. But this time followed the Skye coastline instead of Raasay's coastline. My revised plan was to recross to Raasay further north. When I was younger, I often dreamt of landing in Home Island, locally known as Tir na Nog. Legend has it that if you land on it, you are granted eternal youth. However, now I'm an old man with lots of age-related aches and pains. I no longer want to live forever, so happily passed it by. I followed the impressive and unforgiving Skye coastline as far as Berwick Bay, which is opposite the northern tip of Raasay. All the while the wind and sea threatened to rise again, and as it was now a 5-mile crossing to Raasay, I decided against going to Rona. I decided to head back as there are very few option Bs left for a small boat in this area. This map illustrates my progress so far. Approximately 25 miles. The whole time I was very aware that if I got into difficulties, there was few escape routes by land should I have to land. However, I always take a mental note of possible safe landing spots should the worst happen. Once back at the entrance to Portree Bay, I cut back across the 2-mile stretch of open water to Raasay, where I landed on a large stony beach for a picnic lunch, before getting back into the boat to explore the area at the southern tip of Raasay. Because the wind had now gone completely and the sea became as flat as a mill pond, I crossed the 5 miles of open sea to the Crowlin Islands, before heading back to Skye and landing again at Strelamis, where my tent and car were waiting. A lovely varied day at sea, covering around 60 miles. This map illustrates my journey for that day. I did circumnavigate Rona, Longay and Pabay the following day, but that'll be in part 2. Thanks for watching, stay safe and don't let the cough carry you off.